And then I think I do. Hello, everyone. There we go. I'm getting an echo and unmuted. That's why I keep looking. Hello, everyone. Hey, no more echo. That's great. All right, let me go ahead and get this turned on so that we are live streaming. All right, I think we are live. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking your lunch hour and joining us for one of the Veale Entrepreneurship Speakers Series. I am Mindy Veale. I'm with the Veale Institute and will help make sure as best I can that the technical process works okay here today. I'm subbing for Megan Kuhar, our very talented marketing person. We were double booked today, so bear with me. If anybody can't hear or you can't see or there's a disconnect, please go ahead and make a note in the chat line. That would be greatly appreciated. And with that, I am going to allow our student moderator to introduce herself and then introduce our guests.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vasudha. I am a second-year dental student. Actually, it's funny. I think I ran into Michael Goldberg during one of our casino nights, but what's interesting is that I'm glad you guys are joining in because as part of dentistry, business is one aspect that we tend to overlook. So I'm glad that we can meet together and have this conversation. And right now, I'll introduce Jizal Seikali, who is the founder and CEO of DenTemp. She's originally from Beirut, Lebanon, and has been in the Northeastern Ohio for 30 years. So she's a local. She has almost 2 decades of dental experience and studied at many of our local universities, Cleveland State, John Carroll. She's also graduated from the Expanded Functions Dental Auxiliary Program at Case Western. She was enlisted and commissioned with the Ohio National Guard for 8 years and worked in dozens of dental offices before funding her own company. She started DenTemp, which is a platform that strives to provide dental professionals like us with better pay, freedom, and flexibility, and all in a quality work environment. I'm passing off to you.
Oh, okay. So yes, thank you for the introduction and thank you both for having me here. So as she had mentioned, my parents and I immigrated here in the late 80s and sponsored by my grandfather, who then got my parents both working in the industrial factories in the steel yard, but they started their own company, became entrepreneurs by noticing that there was tires all over the city. So they would collect these tires and essentially resell them to people who couldn't afford new tires. So that quickly became the family business. And from a very young age, both my parents strived to make sure that we had a great education because they didn't want us to be blue collar, getting our hands dirty and having to endure a lot of the struggles that they did. So of course, I went to school and was on the path to dentistry because that was something I thought was of great interest and quickly realized that after serving in the military, doing dental work, I got out, did the expanded functions program, and quickly realized that working with a lot of the students, the residents from Case's program, that they were struggling to find to find a balance between their work and home life, because as I'm sure dentists, students especially, are dealing with a lot and having to endure a lot of preparation, and especially now post-pandemic, trying to figure out where they fit in as far as working for a DSO, a private practice, or even a hospital type of setting. So my main focus while working in the field was creating an environment that allowed dental professionals like myself to have autonomy over my career and not limit my potential based on what the doctor says, or the office manager. So being able to set my own pay rate, being able to say what days I'm available to work, it really helped focus the idea more on my autonomy and my availability and having control over my schedule. So I started handing out resumes to all these offices and telling them, this is what I do, this is when I'm available. And so reach out to me whenever possible. And before I knew it, I was working 6 days a week, making the pay that I wanted. So I started reaching out to my friends and telling them, this is what I'm doing, this doctor needs help. I know you're off today, so do you want to make some extra money? And the first question I always got was, how much are they paying? And my response is, whatever you want. So as a dental professional, being able to have a say in your value, I think is huge, especially as females. We don't really get an opportunity to speak up and say, these are the type of things that I want. And as a temporary professional, temping allows you to make 30% over market. And you can put that towards an HSA, you can put that towards anything. And understanding that a 1099 employee, you can write off your gas, you can write off your food, you can write off your scrubs. As a W-2, we don't have those opportunities. So even if you do want to work in an office, part-time or full-time, this is still a great addition to your income, where you can set your own pay and get all of these benefits that most offices potentially cannot offer you. So having this background, working in DSOs, working in private practices, even working in a hospital setting, I did my hours and rotations at Metro Hospital, and it's a different dynamic. So knowing what to anticipate and getting a chance to try different offices before you commit or sign a contract, especially as dentists, I think is really important. Because as hourly employees, if you sign something and it doesn't work out, there's usually an easy escape. But as a contracted employee like yourself, salary employees, you're pretty much locked in to at least a year, if not more. And if it's not an environment where you're happy or, mentally healthy, then it could potentially give you a sense of not liking your industry. And it has nothing to do with the industry at all. It just could be a very toxic work environment, but you don't know until you get a chance to try that out. So as I was mentioning to you yesterday, having a chance to try out different specialties. So when I was on the dental route, I really wanted to do oral surgery just because I enjoyed that aspect of dentistry. And when I became an EFTA, I realized that cosmetics was more of my speed. So I started working in a lot of cosmetic offices and getting a chance to try out peds or ortho or perio or any of those, different specialties really gives you a chance to figure out, this is more of my speed, this is what I like, and this is the type of pay I should anticipate. And as women, we don't really get a sense of that work-life balance, because if you're married or unmarried, if you have children or don't, some people like myself enjoy traveling. So making sure I'm, getting my bills paid and still have time to leave the country or leave the city for a weekend or a week, or, a lot of us foreign children typically leave for a month at a time because it's not easy to get back home. Usually takes at least 24 hours, right? And so when you go overseas to visit family, it's nice to know, to have that comfort of knowing that when you come back, you have a job ready and willing to pay you. And as of right now, post-pandemic, we've had a lot of opportunities to have the upper hand and say, this is what I want. These are the days I'm available. Now we can work together and build a community and network and really just focus on relationships more so than just the employer-employee, you pay me, I get paid, and anticipating having to put in 30, 40, even 50 hours a week, especially as a dentist, because I know how hard you guys work. And so that's why it's important to have that autonomy and a say in what you want and where you want to do it.
No, I totally agree. And yeah, just I think prioritizing yourself as a woman, I think that usually falls below. I can speak for my mother, or even now as I'm getting into womanhood and all these, I just realized that what you want, you know, or when you're a woman in business, you know, it's yeah. So it's very hard to kind of make a mark for yourself, and especially I'm also like, my parents are also immigrants, so it's hard to have that guidance or have these conversations outside of school, or even outside, even within school, to have these conversations, to be like, you don't have to go from A to B to C, like you don't have to go into dental school, then graduate, then work in an office, then work till retirement, you know, that you can have the quality of life that you want. And you've probably had your own desires like traveling and all these things, and maybe you don't need to travel just by going on research. And so it's a wonderful platform for sure.
No, thank you. And to the networking event that I just came from, it's called Connecting the Heartland event, which really just focuses on venture capitalists meeting with entrepreneurs like myself who are trying to make a difference, who are seeking out capital. And dentistry, as much as you might love the field, is not the end all be all of your field. There's other opportunities to do things even within our dental field. I mean, considering as a dentist, I'm sure many of you follow a lot of the influencers on the Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all these different platforms, but working with even companies like Fabletics or Oral-B, becoming a teacher, like being some sort of instructor, there's so many more opportunities than just being a dentist. And if that's what you want to do, by all means, that's wonderful. I just felt for myself, the students, the residents that I was working with found it very hard to juggle their home and work life. So I can tell you off the top of my head, the one dentist I became really good friends with started working for a DSO. And I don't know if you know what a DSO is, but she realized that she had to meet a certain amount of root canals and fillings and crowns and all these things focused on production more so than healthcare. And it really upset her because we were talking about, you know, if and when I ever become a dentist, I would be very broke because I'm more focused on preventative care and helping out patients to prevent a lot of these issues. And so, you know, after working in the field for about 5 years, her husband is an engineer and she decided to leave dentistry so they could start a family.
Yeah.
And to think, you know, after spending all that time and money to become a dentist and realizing that this lifestyle doesn't fit my needs, my autonomy. And so we had this discussion. You're still licensed. We can get you working at least 1 or 2 days a week. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. We can find a happy balance. And I think sometimes as women, we feel a little defeated because speaking up for ourselves is very hard. And we don't want to create any sort of conflict, especially in our field, because healthcare is focused on helping patients. And sometimes as women, we feel obligated to spend that extra hour there or, you know, pick up another extra day because someone is out. And so we tend to be more empathetic and emotional when it comes to our work, but also understanding that being told, or I guess guilted into doing additional work doesn't necessarily benefit the patients, because if you're not healthy, if you're not putting yourself first, then it's really hard to take care of that person. And you might rush something or overlook something because you're overworked, you're tired, you're thinking about your kids or your husband. And so as women in dentistry, we are over 80% of our industry. And so really supporting each other. And we finally got to the point where the dentists are 50-50 between the men and women. But ultimately, we're still the receptionists, we're still the dental assistants, we're still the office managers, we're still the hygienists. There are men doing what we're doing, but they get to just go home and not have to think about the notes and think about the patients and, continue having our mind at work while we're home with our parents. So this platform is really created with dental professionals in mind. And that's why I wanted to not focus on, a staffing agency, because I'm not telling you how much to make. I'm not telling you where to go. It's focused on your flexibility, your availability, and really just building a network where we can help each other. And especially as new graduates, finding staff is one of the biggest challenges. And so being able to go on the site and see, this person, let's say, went to Case. You're like, okay, Case is a pretty good school. I think, I'll bring them in, and this is what they're asking for, and, seeing if this is the type of relationship you want to build. So my focus for this year has really just been on building a solid foundation for DenTemp, getting these relationships established so that as we move forward, we're able to really just help each other, because we don't have a community where we can support each other beyond school. I mean, typically after school, you build friendships and, you have all these exciting ideas of what you want, but then afterwards, you're kind of thrown into this industry feeling a little lost. Where do I go? How do I decide what I want to do beyond graduation? And so having these conversations with other women and helping each other is really our biggest strength as women in this industry. I mean, we're strong just by numbers alone. Like we have the ability to really help each other and, refer patients to each other or refer staff to each other. And I got a text this morning from a friend saying, hey, I have a dental question for you. My friend has impacted wisdom teeth. Where should she go? And I'm like, well, where does she live? And I can make recommendations. And these are the type of things that are important, because I might know an oral surgeon specialist or a general dentist who is amazing at, anything surgical. I mean, I'm thinking of one dentist I used to work with years ago. I mean, he would pop out wisdom teeth like they were candy. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But like, everyone has their strengths, and to know that about each other, I think is really important, because ultimately helping patients is going to help you. Making those referrals, sending them to endo, sending them to ortho, sending them to oral, whatever the situation might be, it comes back to you tenfold. At least I believe, when your focus is on helping people, then there's no wrong answer. You put your patients first, you make sure your staff is happy, you're going to live a happy life. And the more you focus on production and, trying to cut costs by hiring a less qualified person because you think it's going to save you money, it ends up costing you more because you're having to do twice the work and maybe hire someone additional to essentially compensate for the work that they're lacking. And it just becomes a bigger headache. So developing relationships is really the basis of, creating this dental community, which is DenTemp, which I know that the name is a little misleading because it's temporary work, but essentially anything that you try before you buy. It's temporary work until you decide this is my forever home. And that's why I don't charge any sort of onboarding fees to the offices, because if and when you do find an office that you love, by all means, go. Like, I want you to find a perfect place because I wanted that for myself. I bounced around a lot between offices just because I didn't get along with the dentist or with the office manager or just, you know, issues in general, like the way that procedures were done. And I personally, ethically did not agree with it. And I'm not going to compromise my ethical beliefs based on what this person wants to do to make money, because at the end of the day, I can't do it. So that's, I mean, and to each their own. I'm sure, you know, a lot of these DSOs have wonderful people working there, but I think a big problem that I saw working for DSOs, and I mentioned that only because DenTemp is primarily focused on helping private practices, because that's where we struggle the most. DSOs have their own ecosystem where they can move employees around between offices, where the private practices, if a hygienist doesn't show up, that's it, they have to reschedule all their patients. So patient retention is huge. And if you're losing patients and constantly having to reschedule, you're losing production. And as an EFTA, you know, we're making at least $3,500 a day in production. Hygienists can range between $1,500 to $2,000 in production. So if you're losing an EFTA, if you're losing a hygienist, or even if a dental assistant is out, it's drastically like going against what you're trying to accomplish, which is obviously production, but more so, you know, patient retention and the best interest of your staff and your patients. So that is my long-winded TED Talk. Thank you for coming. So
Can I jump in and
Yeah.
ask a question? And I'm just, I actually have two questions.
Okay.
But I'll do with the first one. I understand the mindset of having invested in dental school and medical school, right? And wanting to have that work-life balance and the attractiveness for this platform. What's the pitch like to these private practices and how do you reach them? I mean, that's a different skill than being a dentist. So I'm just curious how you pivoted and figured out, you know,
I mean,
where to go.
so it's funny you say that, because prior to the pandemic, reaching out to different offices was, especially the private practices, was very difficult. But ultimately, because I started the company in 2018, and building the software was probably my biggest challenge, because I don't have a technical background. I don't have an understanding for coding or even business. I just knew there was a problem in dentistry and I wanted to figure out a way to resolve it. So essentially I used my own dental network to start creating opportunities, not only for myself, but for my friends. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I would just drop off my resume at different offices. I was actually working between 4 different offices, doing after work. So between 4 different offices who were each paying me their own W-2s. So mind you, 4 offices, 4 W-2s, 4 taxes. I mean, I was probably putting in close to 60 hours a week, at least. And I felt very limited on my amount of growth, because I'm breaking my back, I'm getting cramps in my hand, like, you know, all these things that regardless of the way you sit and the things we do, we can't help, depending on the patients, putting our bodies through a lot. And once I started going out there and dropping off my resumes at the offices and telling them, this is what I can do for you. These are all of my certificates. These are all of my degrees. This is how much I want to get paid. Call me when you need me. And at first, you know, it was a bit of a slow start, but in all honesty, I mean, offices started talking to each other. Like, hey, Jizal is really great. Like, she's worth every dollar. She's worth every cent. If you need help, call Jizal. So that's kind of how it started for me. And I really wanted to, like I said, help my friends, because I knew my friends were struggling. And so not necessarily struggling, but, you know, it's nice to make a couple extra $100 a day. It's nice to, you know, be able to plan a vacation. If you work 3 or 4 extra days a month to make $1,000 or $1,500, like additional to what you're doing. So a lot of the dental professionals I work with are working somewhere part-time, or even full-time, but when the offices are closed or going on vacations or doing CE classes or doing all these things, they're not able to pay these dental professionals when the office is closed. I know the one office my friend is in now, they're closing for 2 weeks to do construction. And she's not getting paid for 2 weeks. So what do you do? And granted, those are the exceptions, not the rules, but they still exist. I had a friend text me yesterday, hey, I'm gonna be off next week, Monday through Wednesday. Can you help me find a spot? Of course, go on the website, see all the job opportunities. Like I'll send them to you, that's fine, because we're friends, but ultimately I wanna be able to have this platform so people can utilize it without even having to call me, which I would enjoy talking to all of you, I promise. But being able to change your pay rate, depending on the location, being able to change your availability based on your schedule, because this week you might not have exams, but next week you might be busy every day. So like having that autonomy and not having to dedicate that time to an office every single week consistently, because they need to know their schedule too, and things happen. So it's just nice to be able to, once again, help each other out. And that was pre-pandemic. Now, post-pandemic, I get offices calling me all the time. Post-pandemic is a whole different story. So every office is short-staffed, every office is struggling, specialty or not, it doesn't really matter. I think because I've been doing this for a while, DenTemp has, formed a good reputation, and I am very transparent with the offices and let them know, like, hey, I don't have anyone in your area, but I'm more than happy to post your job on my Instagram, my Twitter, my LinkedIn, my Facebook, get it out to as many people from my network as I can. In addition to obviously posting it on the platform, we can try to get as many people. And of course, having a list of dental professionals from the Ohio State Dental Board, reaching out to, let's say, a hygienist in Chagrin. And I have a list of all the hygienists in Chagrin, and I say, Dr. Smith needs a hygienist on this day. Whatever you're asking for, he'll pay you. And then I get a response from multiple people, and I say, sign up on the site, set your pay, go work for Dr. Smith, and then he'll pay you. So I don't even deal with the payments, because I don't want to be involved with how much you make. The doctors pay you directly. They pay me a subscription fee, a monthly subscription, and then they pay you directly. And so we actually just added the payment process on our site so that the offices can pay you through the site. We can track your hours and payments. So that way, when it comes to tax time, you're able to see Dr. Smith paid you, $1,200 this week. And so there won't be any sort of confusion as to where do I get my, 1099s from, or like, how do I track my hours or anything like that. We're able to track your payments, and it goes from their bank account directly into your bank account via PayPal, and just trying to make things easier for you guys, because ultimately, like I said, it's what I wanted for myself.
Nice.
So I hope that answered your question.
That does answer my question. Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
The second question is, at what point did you visualize in your head and sort of switch hats, where you introduce yourself as the entrepreneur versus a teacher? Or are you not there yet?
I don't know if you're familiar, if anyone here is familiar with the whole imposter syndrome. But sometimes, as much as I love dentistry and I love helping patients and I love what I do, it's hard to really describe myself as, a founder and CEO. Even when I was making my business cards, I'm like, should I put CEO? Is that too cheesy? And I think going back to being a female, we kind of downplay ourselves, and we don't want to seem too arrogant or too, demanding, or come off as being too strong. So eventually at first the CEO was very small next to my name, but now it's the same font and the same size. So it takes a while to be able to speak up for yourself and say, this is what I want. This is what you should call me. And, I really have and still sometimes have a hard time talking on being an entrepreneur because once again, my background is dentistry. I can be in someone's mouth all day. Like it's something I enjoy doing, but learning the business side of being an entrepreneur and a tech founder and a female and a minority and a veteran and all these things like seem to sound more grandioso, but I still have, you know, my insecurities and my struggles with being a business owner. But ultimately, I feel as though I have so much more success knowing that all the hard work that I'm doing is for me and the people around me, as opposed to breaking my back for someone else who might not even appreciate it.
Right.
And like I said, working between 4 offices, and mind you, they were all partners, but they all had their own offices. And I'm like, so I could be getting paid overtime, but instead you're choosing to pay me separately. And I'm, you know, the clinical coordinator and I'm ordering and I'm hiring and I'm doing all these things, which should be paying me a lot more than what you're paying me, putting in 60+ hours a week, but I'm not. And it was really disheartening. So regardless of how great of dentists they were, I'm sure you can all understand, or maybe you'll understand eventually how frugal dentists can be. And they will try to cut costs anywhere and everywhere they can. And I get, especially as a new dentist, why that's important. But when you've been in it for about 30, 40 years, you're like, come on, pay your staff well.
Right.
You know, order some better material. Like get some sharpeners for our instrument. Like it's, I mean, they're really dull. Like you're making this very difficult when it shouldn't be. And so that's why to me, I enjoy temping, because you get to see all these different offices, you get to try all these different technologies. And as long as I've been in dentistry since 2004, things have changed so much. And I don't know how long you've been in the field, but you're still very new. And I can tell you since 2004, when I was still, you know, putting the x-rays through the processing and having to dip and, you know, putting them in their little mounds, like it's incredible to see how things have evolved within our industry. And I really hope that, you know, this platform is another stepping stone to, you know, make our industry better and really help each other out.
Very cool. Does anyone on Zoom or online have any questions? If so, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
So I have a question.
Yes.
For my own. So say I am graduating, you know, I think maybe we're talking to students as well. So how would that look like for a dentist, like newly graduate dentist? Because I think what my thing would be is the first thing I would want to latch onto is security.
Of course, no,
Because
absolutely.
we're coming out with almost $500,000 in debt.
Absolutely.
And so it's just
Yeah.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So for us, it would just be like, okay, I just want to make sure I get a job that can pay me well. And obviously, another thing would be to take care of my health. So how would I work with temping, like for example? And I don't ever want to sign a contract. I think that's a great point to make right off the bat or anything, you know, to take my time and find which office or which people I would like working for, not under, but working
Right.
for. So what would that look like? You know, like I just wanted to explore that.
Yeah, so as far as first and foremost, like any sort of health coverage, you know, especially someone young like you, I always mention an HSA. So I don't know if you're familiar with HSA, but basically it's focused on individuals who pay into an account, like the health savings account is something that rolls over. So unlike typical insurance where you pay into it and it renews every year, as I'm sure you're familiar with dental insurance, right? So they give you a maximum, you have to pay a deductible, and you get a certain percentage for different things. And if you don't use it, essentially you lose it, right? Where an HSA, the health savings account, is really focused on paying into, let's say, $100 a month, whatever you want, $50 a month. you pay whatever you want into the HSA, and then you can use it for essentially any health service, any health related procedures. And so each office, they have to follow an insurance schedule. So every insurance has their own pay rates, right? But if you go to an office and they have their own pay schedule, then you would get like a discounted rate based on your HSA. And so there's no deductible. You essentially pay, you know, whatever percentage that the office is charging you. And then ultimately, whatever you don't use rolls over into the next year.
Okay.
And so you essentially accumulate that money. And what I love about the HSA is you can use it essentially towards anything. So if your back is hurting, you want to get a massage, or you want to go to a chiropractor, or you need an eye exam, or you know, you want to get new glasses, or I mean, the HSA can go towards anything. So that being said, from a young, healthy person, that is what I recommend. On the other note, as far as like finding security and the whole contract thing, if you ever get presented with a contract, definitely have a lawyer look at it. You know, specifically a medical lawyer, because they would understand, you know, the nuances of what these details are. Because if you start working for a doctor and they tell you something, but in contract is something else, you can have a wonderful conversation. I think this person is great until, you know, you want to go on vacation and they say, well, you can't go on vacation because you signed a contract and it said X, Y, and Z, so you're not getting paid, you know, for the first whatever year if you take vacation on, you know, during that time off. I'm just making up an example, but you really have to read the fine details, and that's what a lawyer is for.
Yeah.
You don't have to read it. I'm just saying, hire someone who knows how, like, what they're doing, because they know what to look for. And I think security wise, yes, you have $500,000 in debt. But ultimately, like I said, as a temp worker, you're essentially making 30% more than you would at a regular pay rate. So you can take that additional money, because like I said, as of right now, the dental professionals have the upper hand and can essentially work anywhere. I just had a dentist reach out to me last week and she said, hey, you know, my associate is going on maternity leave for 6 months. Can you help me find a dentist? And I said, yes, of course. Too easy. I have 3 lined up for you right now. And so it's all about just making those connections. And so if you wanted to work at that office for 6 months, you know, making, let's say, $200 an hour as a general dentist, then and that's your prerogative. Obviously, when it comes to specialties, rates vary because you'll get paid more based on your specialty, but ultimately there's always work opportunities. And I think right now, you know, post-pandemic, things are gonna take a while to get back to normal per se, but we had over a 30% exodus of dental professionals from our industry because of going home to take care of their parents or their children, or so there are plenty of opportunities. And I even had a dentist who worked as a hygienist the other day, and she was making $80 an hour as a hygienist just to make some extra money. And I told her, I'm like, I don't mean to insult you. I know you're a dentist, but you're also sitting at home. Do you want to clean some teeth? And she's like, yeah. So, I mean, it really just depends. We're never going to be short on work available. And I think as long as we keep helping each other and get to a point where we can build up this community, the dentists can, you know, kind of have their own ecosystem without being a DSO. They can send each other, you know, staff and have that relationship without feeling any sort of competition. Like, if I send this person there, they're going to quit here, go there. No, we all need to work with each other to really get the patient's interest first, and then ultimately make sure that our offices are running smoothly and we're making production and we're not, you know, like cutthroat with each other. It shouldn't be a competition. We're all trying to establish the same thing. So you'll have security, and if you don't, I'll find it for you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Maureen, Heidi? Is it?
Oh, may
Gazelle?
may I ask a quick question? This is Julie.
Julie, yes, please.
Yeah, thanks very much to share your story. Very inspiring. And I do agree your community culture, people help out with each other. I have very general questions about your business or work. So first one is in your business, so how do you discover your own strengths and how do you fully apply them or strengthen them in your work?
I mean, I find a lot of, I guess, strength and happiness in just helping people, which I know sounds super cheesy, but even in dentistry, being able to work on patients and seeing your work, because I loved, especially working on anterior like teeth, that was like my thing is, changing someone's smile and using a stirrup machine to place crowns or veneers, just being able to design and being hands-on with patients was very rewarding for me. And it was hard for me to kind of step away from that and focus on more of the business side, but ultimately being able to help my friends, to me felt like the best reward ever, because yes, ultimately, of course, I want to help patients, but beyond the patients, if they're not having quality dental professionals working on them, then they're going to be suffering. And so to me, it felt like a kind of like a spiral, like, this little situation where I can have control over making sure, my patients are happy. And I always, for me, keep my family in mind, as far as like recommendations of where I send them. Because my sister had an issue where she had a filling done by an EFTA and it ended up, it wasn't sealed properly. It ended up getting infected and she had to have her tooth pulled. And so this was not a wisdom tooth. This was her actual, number 31. And I felt horrible for her because I'm like, I could have done it for you, you should have let me work on you. But it's finding strengths in the things that you're passionate about are really important. So as a dentist, I don't know what year you're in, but I think, once you find something that really gives you joy, and, if it's a specific specialty, if it's yoga, if it's anything that like gives you some sort of peace and happiness, that's, really where it's at. For me, I walk every morning, 2-3 hours. I like to get up early and like usually in the warmer weather, of course, but that to me, I start my day off doing something I love, and it gives me the energy and the motivation to do everything else. But entrepreneurship is difficult. I will say it's not an easy task. It's not for everybody. It took me 5 years to even get to this point. It'll be 5 years, April 18th. So, it's taken me a while to get to this point where I can even sit here and have this conversation with you. Because even as a Case Western graduate, when I first started my company, I reached out to a lot of the professors and people I work with, and I have this great idea and you should help me. And they're like, no. And it's hard. It's really, it's defeating at first, but I really felt like I had something that was going to be helping people. So I stuck with it. And I put a lot of my own money and time and investments into this because I ultimately felt that I was going to find success regardless of who didn't believe in me. It took time. I went to the ODA multiple times. Even through the pandemic, I kept marketing. Like it takes a lot of time and effort. So starting a business, being a dentist, I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort. And so knowing where you want to start, whether it's a hospital, DSO, private practice, you really have to like kind of mentally prepare for that.
Okay, thanks. Glad you found it something you really, really like.
Yes, thank you so much.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Jizal, Heidi, Maureen? Okay.
All right, well, we have time for one more question, so sort of last call. Okay.
I think we covered, most of, because the thing is, I think most thing was just finding autonomy and balancing your own life. And I think the importance of not losing yourself in the grind kind of attitude,
Yeah.
and also, why would you spend so much money, your parents spend so much of their hard-earned money into your education to finally work in a place. I mean, that you're not getting rewarded for,
Right.
that doesn't make any sense practically.
Right, no, right.
So, I think what I've understood is this is just a great community to be connected with. So that when you step out, you're not going solo.
Yeah, no,
You're not
absolutely.
being-
And there's a lot of great communities that currently exist. I mean, there's the greater Cleveland or the, I'm sorry, why am I drawing a blank right now? The Greater Cleveland Dental Society, and there's, the Greater Toledo Dental Society, and there's the Greater Youngstown. So there's a lot of, and then there's Women in Dentistry group, and there's so many great groups that do support each other. I just feel as though I want to connect beyond just the cities. I want to try to connect. Right now, my focus has been only on Ohio. So like connecting Youngstown, Toledo, and Akron, and Cleveland, and Columbus, and Cincinnati. And yes, we might see each other once a year at the ODA, but we should be able to communicate beyond just the ODA. And, as I'm sure, I don't know if you are all from this area or not, obviously you're here at school now, but once you graduate, being able to find options outside of Cleveland or somewhere you want to live, even if it's another state, like having those, options available to you because you've been chatting with someone on the site for the past year or two, and you're developing those relationships. So if you decide to move, let's say to Florida, you've made connections with people in Florida. If you decide to move to California, Iowa, Arizona, it doesn't matter. Like the focus right now is Ohio, because that's where I've been essentially starting my beta and putting a lot of the grants and everything I've been receiving. Focusing on Ohio and getting the numbers and strengthening the platform so that when we do grow beyond Ohio, you guys have the availability to make those connections everywhere and anywhere else.
Wonderful. Well, we are just about out of time, so I want to very much thank both of you. Jizal, amazing, amazing story. And I want to personally thank you as someone who is not a dentist, but who is in the entrepreneurial space, helping our faculty and our students and our alumni. The fact that you articulated out loud, you start with a problem and that you looked to solve a problem is huge. So any aspiring engineer or entrepreneurs out there, look for a problem to solve. It's so much easier than developing a widget or a gadget or an app.
Which are fun too.
Which are fun, but when you try and push it, it's harder, it resonates more when you've identified a problem, and it was very personal to you, and then you could relate then to the practice, and so connecting with customers is so much easier, when that's the case. So thank you.
Thank you
for that.
guys,
Greatly
thank you both,
appreciate it.
thank you everyone.
Upcoming events for Veale, so everyone's aware. We do have a skills lab on finance, business incorporation, and IP. That is tomorrow at noon. Feel free to join us. We also have a guest speaker on Thursday, Dr. Brian Grant out of sociology. Fascinating story, started in law, moved to sociology, done some work with the UN. Encourage everyone to tune in. And last but not least, we have our Morgan Thaler Pavey startup competition, April 11th. It is open to the public. Please join us. It'll be here in ThinkBox on the second floor and the newly opened community floor at 5 o'clock. And we have food, so come join us for a light dinner.
Maybe I'll come see you guys there. Shamelessly,
Would love
can I
that.
plug in,
Yes.
DenTemp, please follow, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, spread the word. Really, it's just about helping each other. So please spread the word and I'll send this information.
I was
to
gonna
you.
say, send it to us and
Yes.
we'll get it up on our social media site and on our website as well. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. Bye, guys. Hope I didn't talk
Well,
too
thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, Giselle.